Before this story starts, I want to know one thing. Where are you right now? I mean, actually, what city, what country? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, every time. No exceptions. This channel exists because of the people watching, and I genuinely want to know where you are. And while you're at it, what time is it where you're sitting? Like, literally right now. Morning? Middle of the night? You can't sleep, and you ended up here? Just type it. I love seeing that. It's like target is 50 likes, that's all. If this story does what I think it's going to do to you, hit that button. 10 likes keeps this channel breathing. If you are brand new here, welcome. We cover real historical mysteries, documented, verified, no fluff. Hit subscribe if that's your thing. Now, let's talk about what American military pilots started reporting over the skies of Europe in late 1944. And why the United States Army Air Forces quietly began an investigation they never fully resolved. It is November 23rd, 1944. 19,000 feet above the Rhine Valley. The night is partly cloudy. There is a quarter moon. Below, the river cuts through the border between France and Germany, like a scar that hasn't healed. 3 American airmen are in the cockpit of a Bristol Beaufighter Night Fighter. Their mission is routine: intercept German aircraft. Come home, do it again tomorrow. Then the observer in the back seat says something quietly. He doesn't shout it. He doesn't sound afraid. He says it the way you say something when you're not sure you're seeing what you think you're seeing. He says, "I wonder what those lights are. Over there in the hills." They were not in the hills. They were moving, fast, faster than anything that crew had seen in 2 years of night combat flying. And that question, what are those lights, would not have a clean answer for the rest of the war. Or after it, what did those men actually see? To understand what happened over Europe in the final winter of World War II, you need to understand what that winter looked like from the cockpit. By late 1944, the Allied air campaign over occupied Europe had been grinding for over 2 years. The 8th Air Force was running daylight bombing raids deep into Germany. Night Fighter Squadrons were operating along the front lines, protecting bombers, hunting German interceptors, flying patrols over rivers and mountain ranges, where the front lines shifted week by week. The 415th Night Fighter Squadron of the United States Army Air Forces was based at Dijon, in south-central France. Dijon sits roughly 150 miles southwest of Strasbourg, near the French-German border and the Rhine. The squadron's mission was night interception, flying in darkness, relying on radar and radio to find enemy aircraft over terrain that was, by late 1944, extremely dangerous. The Rhine Valley itself had become one of the most heavily contested air corridors in the European theater. German flak was dense. Enemy fighters operated at night. The Vosges Mountains to the west created terrain challenges that compressed flight paths and reduced reaction times. These were not inexperienced pilots. The men of the 415th had been flying combat missions over North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and now France. Lieutenant Edward Schlueter, the pilot at the controls on the night of November 23rd, was, in the words of a 1945 account published in American Legion magazine, a highly experienced night fighter, already decorated, stationed at Dijon, a native of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. With him that night, radar observer Lieutenant Donald J. Myers, and intelligence officer Lieutenant Fred Ringwald, 33 years old, from St. Louis, Missouri, flying as an observer. 3 professional military airmen, clear heads, combined years of combat experience, eyes trained to distinguish threat from shadow. What they were about to see had no entry in any military manual they had ever read. The patrol had been routine for the first hour. Schlueter was flying east, over the Vosges Mountains, heading toward the Rhine. Ringwald was in the observer's position. Myers was working the radar set, standard night intercept posture, listening, watching, waiting for something German to show up on the scope. It was Ringwald who saw them first, 8 to 10 lights. Off the left wing, Not on the radar, not on the ground radar network either. Mayors checked with Allied ground control and got nothing. No return, no contact. As far as every instrument on that aircraft and on the ground was concerned, there was nothing out there. But Ringwald could see them, glowing, orange, moving at high speed through the night air. The lights were not stationary. They were not falling. No trajectory, no arc downward, no smoke trail. They moved laterally, at altitude, in a way that Ringwald later described as purposeful. Sluter turned the aircraft toward them. They vanished, and then moments later reappeared further away, as if the act of the aircraft turning toward them had caused them to retreat, to keep their distance. The display lasted several minutes. The lights moved. They held formation with each other. They did not behave like flak. They did not behave like tracer fire. They did not behave like any German weapon in the squadron's intelligence briefings. And then they were gone. Ringwald filed the report. It was his job. He was the intelligence officer. That report, documenting the sighting of 8 to 10 unidentified light leads exhibiting controlled movement over the Rhine Valley on the night of November 23, 1944, went up the chain of command to the intelligence section at 12 Tactical Air Command. It was the first formally filed account of what would soon have a name. Lieutenant Donald Myers came up with it. He pulled it from a comic strip popular among the aircrew, Smokey Stover, where a nonsense word, foo, was used as slang. He called them Foo Fighters. The name stuck. The lights kept coming back. Right now, comments section, I need to know. German secret weapon, natural phenomenon, something else entirely. Pick a side. Because what happens next makes every one of those answers more complicated. It is December 17th, 1944. Near Breisach, Germany. The front line is a matter of miles away. An American pilot is on a solo intercept mission at approximately 800 feet. Low, close to the ground. The kind of altitude where mistakes cost everything. He sees 5 or 6 lights. They are flashing, red and green, arranged in the shape of the letter T. He watches them. They watch him back, or at least they move as if they are aware of him. They close toward 8 o'clock, slightly behind and to the left, narrowing the distance between them and the aircraft. He does not fire. There is nothing to fire at. The lights have no fuselage, no wing shape, no exhaust plume, no dimension that a gun could address. And then, without transition, without any change in behavior that would signal departure, they are gone. 5 days later, December 22nd, 2 separate flight crews in the same area. 2 separate reports, filed independently, describing the same thing. Lights rising from the earth to 10,000 feet, pacing the fighter, then peeling off and moving away. One crew wrote in their report, and this language appears in the intelligence files compiled by Lieutenant Ringwald and forwarded to 12 Tactical Air Command, that the objects appeared to be under perfect control at all times. Perfect control, not erratic, not random, not explainable as atmospheric discharge or drifting munitions. Under perfect control. By the end of December 1944, the sightings have stopped being individual anomalies. Ringwald compiles a report listing 14 separate incidents across December alone and into early January. The report goes up the chain. The Army Air Command sends officers to investigate. Those officers produce a report. That report is lost after the war. It has never been found. Here is what makes the Foo Fighter phenomenon genuinely difficult to dismiss. It was not an American phenomenon. The German Luftwaffe was reporting the same lights. Not new German technology that Allied pilots were misidentifying. The Germans were as baffled as the Americans. Their air crews had their own name for them. Kraut fireballs. The Americans called them in informal communication, but German pilots were filing reports of unidentified luminous objects that followed their own aircraft, defied pursuit, and disappeared without engagement. An enemy does not build a weapon and then deploy it against their own air force. The mutual sightings, Allied and Axis alike, ruled out the most obvious explanation almost immediately. The Royal Air Force Bomber Command was seeing them too. A classified intelligence memo from the period, reviewed after the war by researchers with access to British Air Ministry records, noted, Bomber command crews have for some time been reporting similar phenomena. A few of the alleged aircraft may have been Me-62s, and for the rest, flak rockets are suggested as the most likely explanation. The whole affair is still something of a mystery, and the evidence is very sketchy and varied so that no definite and satisfactory explanation can yet be given. The British memo does not say, "This has been resolved." It says, "This has not been resolved." And then the Pacific. B-29 Superfortress crews of the United States 5th Air Force, running bombing raids over Japan in early 1945, began reporting what they called balls of fire. Not large, luminous, pacing the aircraft on long missions over enemy territory, not attacking, not retreating, simply accompanying. The Pacific sightings differed in one important detail from the European accounts. In Europe, the objects evaded pursuit. In the Pacific, on at least one documented occasion, referenced in the tactical mission reports from the raid over Tokyo and Kawasaki on April 15, 1945, B-29 gunners engaged one of these objects directly with their .50 caliber machine guns. The object broke apart. That report sits in the official tactical records alongside conventional combat claims. It was not filed separately as something strange. It was logged the way a downed enemy aircraft would have been logged. Because to the crew who filed it, that is what it was, something they engaged, and something that came apart. What it was made of, what fell from it, is not recorded. 3 theaters, 2 opposing sides of the war, multiple nations. Independent reports, filed by trained military personnel, with no coordination between them, describing the same core characteristics: luminous, fast, apparently aware. In January 1945, Time magazine ran a story. The headline, "Foo Fighter." It was the first time the American public encountered the accounts. The story confirmed what the squadrons had been filing for weeks. These objects were real enough that they were being investigated at the command level. No explanation was offered, because none existed. 4 explanations have been seriously advanced in the decades since the war. None of them closed the case completely. The first, German secret technology. The obvious answer in 1944 was that the Reich had developed some kind of remote-controlled drone or electromagnetic weapon designed to interfere with Allied aircraft. Scientists working for the Army Air Forces at the time, including physicists with high-level clearances, took this possibility seriously. But post-war examination of German military records and the testimony of captured German scientists found no evidence of a weapon matching the description. And critically, the Germans were seeing the same objects over their own airspace. A weapon is not designed to follow the aircraft of the nation that built it. The second, atmospheric and natural phenomena, St. Elmo's fire, a well-documented electrical discharge that can produce glowing plasma around aircraft in certain atmospheric conditions, was proposed early and often. Ball lightning, a rare but scientifically documented phenomenon involving self-sustaining luminous plasma, was another candidate. These are real. They occur. But St. Elmo's fire does not maintain altitude, does not maneuver in response to pursuit, and does not appear in formation. Ball lightning is transient. Seconds, not the sustained minutes described in multiple Ringwald reports. Natural phenomena do not peel off and follow aircraft as the crew turns toward them, then resume station when the crew levels out. The third, combat-induced misperception, sleep deprivation, high-altitude hypoxia, the psychological pressure of sustained combat, and the disorienting effect of darkness and flak bursts on night vision are all real contributors to perceptual error. Studies of Allied aircrew psychology during the war documented cases of genuine misidentification. This is a credible framework, but Ringwald's 14 incidents in December alone involved multiple independent crews on separate missions who did not communicate about their sightings before filing. The convergence of specific detail across independent reports is difficult to explain through individual perceptual error alone. The fourth, and this one arrived from an unexpected direction, is the oldest: the Rhine Valley, the Vosges Mountains, and the broader terrain over which these sightings clustered had documented accounts of luminous aerial phenomena stretching back centuries in regional folklore and natural philosophy records. Pre-modern German and Alsatian accounts describe moving lights in the night sky above the Rhine that behave with apparent purpose. Those accounts predate aviation. They predate electricity, whatever their explanation, and they likely have one. They suggest that something observable and consistent has been occurring in that specific geography for a very long time. The war did not create the phenomenon. The war just put qualified observers in the sky to document it. None of these four explanations fully accounts for the complete pattern of evidence. Not one. That is not a dramatic conclusion. It is the honest one. Stay with me. Because the final account, the one that only came to light through post-war declassification, involving a source no one expected, is the one that changes how you think about everything we have just covered. Thank you for being here. Hit like if this has you thinking and stay. After the war ended, the Army Air Force's investigation into the Foo Fighters, the one launched by command, the one that had produced a formal report, was gone. The officers who had been sent to investigate returned. The report they produced did not survive the transition from wartime to peacetime record-keeping. It is listed in the AAF's own administrative records as having existed. Its conclusions are not available to read. What did survive were the individual squadron intelligence files, Ringwald's compiled reports, the tactical mission summaries from the Pacific, the British Air Ministry memo, and the personal accounts of men who came home and, when asked, spoke about what they had seen. Richard Ziebart was the historian for the 417th Night Fighter Squadron, the unit operating alongside the 415th. He heard the stories directly from crew members who had experienced the sightings. Years later, speaking to Keith Chester, the author of Strange Company, Military Encounters with UFOs in World War II, Ziebart described the men of the 415th this way. The pilots were very professional. They gave the report. They talked about the lights, but they did not speculate about them. Professional men, trained to observe, unwilling to speculate. One pilot from the 415th, speaking to Chester years after the war, described his feeling during a sighting in a single phrase, not a clinical phrase, not a careful phrase. The phrase of someone who, decades later, had not found a better word for what he experienced at 19,000 feet over a dark river in occupied Europe. He said he was scared, not of the lights themselves, not because they had threatened him, but because, he said, they moved like they knew where we were going before we did. An Associated Press war correspondent named Robert C. Wilson had spent New Year's Eve 1944 with the 415th at Dijon. The day after, his story on the Foo Fighters ran on the front page of newspapers across America. It was the first time the public heard the word. It was not the last time trained, credible witnesses described what the word was trying to name. And then the sightings stopped. Not gradually, not one by one, over months. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the reports from the European theater ended. No one has explained that timing either. Here is the thing that stays with me. These were combat pilots, night fighters, men who had flown through flak over North Africa and Italy and France. Men for whom the sky at night was a workspace, not a mystery. Men trained specifically to look at things in the dark and identify them correctly, because the wrong identification could get them killed. They were not impressionable, they were not naive, and they were not alone. Multiple nations, multiple theaters, both sides of the war. Men who had every professional and personal reason to keep quiet, filing official reports that said, "Today, we saw something and we cannot tell you what it was." Combat does something to perception. It sharpens certain things almost beyond normal human capacity. A pilot who has survived a year of night missions over enemy territory does not jump at shadows. He has long since learned the difference between what is real and what his mind is manufacturing under pressure. So, I want to leave you with a question that I do not have an answer for. If the most qualified observers in the world, trained military personnel, multiple nationalities independent of each other, in a period before the idea of flying saucers had entered the public imagination, file consistent reports describing the same objects with the same characteristics, and the official investigation that was launched to answer those reports simply ceases to exist after the war. What are we supposed to make of the silence? The men of the 415th came home. They went back to Wisconsin and Missouri, and wherever else home was. They did not, for the most part, talk about what they had seen over the Rhine. Not publicly, not in the years that followed when the subject became something people laughed about. Ringwald filed his reports. Myers gave the lights their name. Schluter turned the plane toward them once and watched them disappear. Whatever moved in that dark sky over the Rhine Valley in the winter of 1944 moved on its own terms, not ours. Now I want to hear from you. Which of those 4 theories do you actually believe? German tech? Natural phenomenon? Pilot perception under stress? Or something older than all of that? Drop it in the comments. Let's build this out together. I read every single one. We set a goal of 50 likes today. If we've already crossed it, thank you. Genuinely, that is your support pushing this channel forward. If we haven't crossed it yet, this is the moment. Next time on this channel, a different war, a different theater, and a patrol report that was classified for 60 years, not because of what the soldiers found, but because of what they said they heard, in the dark, with no radio contact, for 11 hours. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you in the dark.